Beyond forgetfulness, unraveling the links between vascular health and cognitive decline in the elderly. Picture this. Margaret, a vibrant 72-year-old grandmother, notices she's having trouble finding her car keys again. But this isn't just ordinary forgetfulness. What's happening inside Margaret's brain at this very moment involves a silent war between her blood vessels and her cognitive abilities, a battle that millions of elderly people worldwide are fighting every single day, often without even knowing it. What if I told you that the same heart disease that runs in your family, the high blood pressure your doctor keeps mentioning, and even those tiny, silent mini-strokes could be rewiring your brain in ways that make Alzheimer's disease look like just the tip of the iceberg? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most groundbreaking discoveries in modern neuroscience, the intricate, almost mystical connection between your vascular system and your mind. Welcome to a journey that will fundamentally change how you think about aging, memory, and the incredible organ we call the brain. I'm about to reveal scientific discoveries so recent that many doctors are still learning about them. Research that's overturning decades of assumptions about why our minds change as we age. In the next 10 minutes, you're going to discover exactly why your cardiovascular health today determines your cognitive fate tomorrow. We'll explore the shocking truth about what scientists call vascular cognitive impairment, a condition affecting over 20 million people worldwide that's been hiding in plain sight, masquerading as normal aging. Here's what we're covering in today's deep dive. First, I'll reveal the startling difference between vascular dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Differences so subtle that even medical professionals often miss them, yet so crucial they could change everything about your prevention strategy. You'll learn about the bright spots that neuroscientists are finding in brain scans, mysterious markers that appear in 95% of people over 82, and why these spots might be the key to predicting cognitive decline decades before symptoms appear. Then we'll unpack the revolutionary research from institutions like Clemson University and the National Institute on Aging that's revealing how tiny proteins in your blood vessels are literally poking holes in your brain's protective barrier. I'll explain the heart-brain axis, a connection so powerful that heart disease diagnosed before age 60 increases your risk of memory problems by a staggering 75%. We'll examine why women face different risks than men when it comes to cardiovascular-related cognitive decline, and why some people's brains remain sharp well into their 90s while others struggle in their 60s. You'll discover the hidden role of those mini-strokes you might have had without knowing, and how they create a stepwise pattern of cognitive decline that's completely different from Alzheimer's gradual progression. Most importantly, I'll share cutting-edge prevention strategies based on the latest 2024 research, interventions that go beyond the typical eat well and exercise advice you've heard before. We're talking about specific blood pressure medications that can actually reverse brain damage, lifestyle modifications that increase blood flow by up to 30%, and early detection methods that can identify problems 20 years before symptoms appear. But here's where it gets really interesting. We'll end with a true story that perfectly illustrates everything we've discussed. A story about two identical twins, both diagnosed with the exact same cardiovascular risk factors at age 50, but whose cognitive destinies couldn't have been more different. Their story reveals the one crucial factor that made all the difference, a factor that's completely within your control. Before we dive into this mind-bending science, if you're finding this information as fascinating as I am, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. This channel is dedicated to bringing you the latest breakthroughs in aging research before they become mainstream knowledge. And if you know someone who's worried about memory changes, whether in themselves or a loved one, please share this video. The information we're about to cover could literally be life-changing. Also, drop a like if you're ready to challenge everything you thought you knew about brain aging. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never think about your cardiovascular health the same way again. Let's start with a fundamental truth that medical schools are just beginning to teach. Your brain is not just an electrical organ, it's a vascular organ. Every single thought you have, every memory you form, every decision you make depends entirely on a complex network of blood vessels delivering oxygen and nutrients to your brain cells with split-second precision. Here's what's revolutionary about recent research. Scientists have discovered that cognitive decline in the elderly isn't just about plaques and tangles in brain tissue, as we've believed for decades. Instead, it's often about what's happening in the microscopic blood vessels that feed your brain, vessels so tiny that 50 of them could fit across the width of a human hair. The term vascular cognitive impairment was practically unknown outside academic circles until recently, but research published in 2024 shows it affects more people than Alzheimer's disease itself. Unlike Alzheimer's disease, which typically starts with memory problems, vascular cognitive impairment first shows up as changes in processing speed, attention, and executive function, the mental abilities that help you plan, focus, and multitask. Think about it this way. If Alzheimer's is like a slow-burning fire that gradually consumes memories, vascular cognitive impairment is like a series of power outages that leave different areas of your brain functioning at reduced capacity. The lights don't go out all at once. Instead, you notice that your mental processing feels sluggish, decisions take longer, and complex tasks that used to be automatic now require conscious effort. Recent studies using advanced brain imaging have revealed something extraordinary: bright white spots called white matter hyperintensities that show up on MRI scans. These spots, which researchers sometimes call bright brain spots, are present in only 10% of 64-year-olds, but appear in nearly 95% by age 82. What's shocking is that these spots directly correlate with cognitive decline, and they're caused by damage to small blood vessels in your brain. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. Research from Clemson University, published in Nature Communications in 2024, has identified the exact mechanism causing this vascular damage. Scientists discovered that proteins called amyloid beta oligomers, the same proteins involved in Alzheimer's disease, actually break apart into smaller nanoparticles that damage the blood-brain barrier. Dr. Feng Ding described it as these nanoparticles literally poking holes in the protective barrier that separates your brain from your blood circulation. Imagine your brain's blood vessels as a high-security fence protecting a valuable garden. These protein fragments are like vandals, cutting holes in the fence, allowing harmful substances to enter and damage the delicate brain tissue inside. This discovery explains why 95% of Alzheimer's patients also have what's called cerebral amyloid angiopathy, plaque deposits in their brain's blood vessels. It's not just coincidence, it's a direct cause and effect relationship that's been hiding in plain sight. Now let's talk about the heart-brain connection that's revolutionizing how we think about preventing cognitive decline. The Lancet Commission on Dementia's 2024 report identified cardiovascular health as one of the most powerful modifiable risk factors for dementia, more powerful than genetics, more influential than education level, and more predictive than family history. Studies involving over 75,000 individuals across 13 European databases found that people with cardiovascular disease diagnosed before age 60 have a 75% higher risk of cognitive decline later in life. But here's what's particularly striking. This risk is even higher for women. Female patients with cardiovascular disease showed a 2.4-fold increase in cognitive decline risk compared to men with identical conditions.
The mechanism behind this gender difference is still being studied, but researchers believe it's related to hormonal changes during menopause that affect how women's brains respond to vascular damage. The protective effects of estrogen on blood vessels may explain why cardiovascular risk factors become particularly dangerous for women's cognitive health after menopause. But perhaps the most hopeful discovery is that this process is largely preventable and, in some cases, even reversible. Research published in 2024 found that certain blood pressure medications don't just prevent further damage, they can actually reduce the size and number of those bright white spots we discussed earlier. The key is understanding that your brain's blood vessels are incredibly plastic, meaning they can adapt and even regenerate under the right conditions. Studies show that maintaining optimal blood pressure, managing cholesterol levels, and keeping blood sugar stable can increase cerebral blood flow by up to 30% within just 6 months. Now, let me share a story that brings all of this research to life, a real case that perfectly illustrates the power of understanding the vascular-cognitive connection. This is the story of Eleanor and Ruth, identical twins whose lives took dramatically different paths, teaching us perhaps the most important lesson about cognitive aging. Eleanor and Ruth were born just minutes apart in 1954, sharing identical DNA and growing up in the same household with the same parents, the same diet, and remarkably similar lifestyles well into their adult years. Both became teachers, both married around the same time, and both had their health carefully monitored as part of a longitudinal aging study that began when they turned 50. At their 50th birthday health screening, both sisters received nearly identical diagnoses: mild hypertension, slightly elevated cholesterol, and early signs of insulin resistance. Their family history was concerning. Their father had died of a stroke at 68, and their mother had developed vascular dementia in her early 70s. According to their genetic risk profiles, both sisters had a high probability of following the same path. But here's where their stories diverged dramatically. Eleanor, the older twin by 3 minutes, took her diagnosis seriously, but approached it conventionally. She started taking blood pressure medication as prescribed, made modest changes to her diet, and tried to walk more regularly. She followed up with her doctor annually and generally did what most people do when faced with cardiovascular risk factors, the minimum necessary to keep her numbers in an acceptable range. Ruth, however, became fascinated by the emerging research on the brain-heart connection. She dove deep into the scientific literature and discovered studies showing that intensive blood pressure control, not just adequate control, could preserve cognitive function. She learned about the importance of blood flow variability and began monitoring her blood pressure multiple times daily, working with her doctor to optimize not just her average numbers, but the consistency of her cardiovascular health. Ruth also discovered research on exercise and brain blood flow that went far beyond the typical recommendations. Instead of just walking, she incorporated high-intensity interval training specifically designed to improve cerebral circulation. She learned about the cognitive benefits of activities that challenge coordination and balance, taking up dancing and later Tai Chi. Most importantly, Ruth discovered the research on sleep and vascular health. She learned that sleep apnea, even mild cases, could dramatically reduce nighttime brain blood flow. Despite having no obvious symptoms, she requested a sleep study and discovered moderate sleep apnea. With treatment, her sleep quality improved dramatically, and her daytime blood pressure became much more stable. For 20 years, the sisters followed their different paths. Eleanor's approach kept her cardiovascular numbers in the normal range according to standard guidelines. Ruth's intensive approach kept her numbers in what researchers now call the optimal range for brain health. At age 70, both sisters underwent comprehensive cognitive testing as part of the same research study. The results were startling. Eleanor showed clear signs of what researchers classified as mild vascular cognitive impairment. Her processing speed had declined significantly. She had trouble with complex tasks that required switching between different types of thinking, and brain imaging revealed numerous white matter hyperintensities, those bright white spots we discussed earlier. While she was still functionally independent, her family had noticed the changes, and she herself felt frustrated by tasks that used to be effortless. Ruth, meanwhile, performed nearly identically to how she had tested 20 years earlier. Her processing speed remained sharp, her executive function was intact, and her brain scans showed remarkably few signs of vascular damage. According to the researchers, her cognitive function was equivalent to someone 15 to 20 years younger. The difference between the sisters wasn't genetic. They shared identical DNA. It wasn't luck or coincidence. The difference was Ruth's understanding that preventing cognitive decline required more than just preventing heart disease. It required optimizing the intricate relationship between cardiovascular health and brain function. Today, at age 70, Eleanor requires assistance with complex tasks like managing finances and has had to give up driving in challenging conditions. Ruth continues to teach part-time, travels independently, and recently learned to use advanced computer software for a volunteer project she's leading. The story of Eleanor and Ruth illustrates the most important point of everything we've discussed today. The connection between vascular health and cognitive function isn't just about avoiding disease. It's about optimizing the incredible potential of your aging brain. The research we've covered today represents a fundamental shift in how we understand cognitive aging. We're moving beyond the fatalistic view that mental decline is inevitable toward a recognition that your daily choices about cardiovascular health are literally sculpting your cognitive future. The bright spots in your brain, the integrity of your blood-brain barrier, the efficiency of your cerebral circulation, these aren't fixed by your genetics. They're shaped by your choices, your awareness, and your commitment to treating your brain as the vascular organ it truly is. If this information has opened your eyes to new possibilities for protecting your cognitive health, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to stay updated on the latest breakthrough research in brain health and aging. And remember, when it comes to the connection between your heart and your brain, knowledge isn't just power. It's prevention. Your cognitive future isn't written in stone. It's written in the daily choices you make about your vascular health, starting today.